Welcome back. Election season will ramp up in the new year as U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham seeks another term in office. But a Democratic challenger, pediatrician Annie Andrews, is looking to take his seat. Joining me in the WCBD Plus Streaming Center is News 2's digital political reporter, Sophie Brams. Sophie, welcome. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Tim. Doing great. Glad to be here.
Yes. Well, you recently reviewed a new poll focused on the U.S. Senate race in South Carolina. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so this was a poll that was commissioned by 314 Action, which is a progressive-leaning political action committee that recruits and trains scientists to run for higher office, to run for elected office. And they are actually endorsing or they're supporting Dr. Annie Andrews in this Senate race for Senator Lindsey Graham's seat. So they commissioned this poll. It was done by Public Policy Polling the week before Thanksgiving, surveyed about 700 South Carolina voters. And they found some really interesting things here. They found that 60% of the people that they polled said that it was time for someone new. And just 29% of them said that they thought that Lindsey Graham should be reelected. 41% of voters, said that they would vote for Lindsey Graham if the election was held today. But 39% said they would vote for his Democratic opponent, whoever that was. 20% said they weren't sure, so still a little bit of room there, obviously, for both sides, both Democrat and Republican, whoever does win that nomination come next June, to build some ground there with those, still pretty large, percentage of undecideds in that race. But then they looked at a hypothetical matchup between Lindsey Graham and Dr. Annie Andrews. And what they found there is that Andrews was polling only about 6 points behind. And now her campaign says, they see a lot of, kind of an opening in this. They're looking at, recent wins in places like Virginia, in places like Georgia and Florida, and seeing, maybe there is some room, maybe people are hungry for a new candidate.
Well, Sophie, I want to talk about that because based on this poll and some other polls that we have seen, a lot of people in South Carolina generally seem unhappy with Graham, and Annie Andrews' campaign see an opening in this race. Why is that, and where does she stand right now?
As I mentioned, some of those recent, overperformances or wins by Democrats in both statewide races, for governors, but also in state house elections or special elections that were going on. We've seen Democrats gain some ground over this year, kind of gaining some momentum heading into the midterms next year. And I think that is contributing to why her campaign, feels kind of positive about the results coming in here. Obviously, this poll shows her still 6 points behind in a hypothetical matchup. She's still going to have to win that nomination, but they definitely see some kind of room to, reach out to some of those voters, maybe on the other side, some of those independent voters, and build some momentum there kind of heading into the new year.
Well, I think we've got some sound. If you are ready, we can take a listen to that.
Yeah.
I am a pediatrician and a mom of three who sees politics as an avenue to solve the problems that I saw every day in my job at the Children's Hospital. I took care of kids and families who were to put food on the table, struggling to pay for prescription drugs, to pay their utility bills. And these are real problems that hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians are facing. I've worked my entire career in hospitals, and I will be laser focused on fixing the broken healthcare system that we have here in South Carolina and addressing our affordability crisis.
And now you also heard from Graham's campaign, who also expect a competitive race?
Yeah, they did. They told me they expect Dr. Annie Andrews to run a competitive race if she wins the primary. They are expecting, a good fight in this. If you just look at what happened in 2020, Jamie Harrison came, not too close. He still ended up 10 points behind, but he generated a lot of momentum. He certainly gave Lindsey Graham a tough fight in that reelection. So they're expecting the same thing, this time around with whoever the Democratic opponent is. And, in talking to the Andrews campaign, they really kind of pointed to Lindsey Graham's approval rating, or disapproval rating, I should say, that was found in this poll. And in that, 54% of the people that were surveyed said that they disapproved of the job that Lindsey Graham was doing. And that's why you just heard her there, kind of trying to paint that difference between them, talking about her role as a pediatrician, working in healthcare. And she told me that she really thinks that the Trump administration's policies have negatively impacted healthcare here in South Carolina, but really in the whole country. And she puts a lot of that blame on Lindsey Graham and on his, vote to confirm the Health and Human Services Secretary, RFK Jr. And so, she's really trying to just paint that difference between herself and Graham.
And we've got some sound on Andrews talking about the 2026 race. We'll listen to that now as well.
So we find ourselves in a truly unprecedented political moment in this country. Political partisan behavior and voting patterns will be transcended in November 2026. And that's because so many South Carolinians are hurting from the effects of the Trump administration enabled by our own Senator Lindsey Graham.
Now, Sophie, what do you make of all of this? What do you think when Andrews is putting this out there? What do you make of all of that?
Well, I think we have to look at, kind of the evidence we have from previous years, going back to Jamie Harrison. He raised over $100 million in that 2020 bid to try to unseat Lindsey Graham. He seemed to have really good polling momentum going into the race, but as I mentioned earlier, he still lost that race by 10 points. And so I think, a lot of Democrats that I've heard from or talked to or just seen what they've had to say kind of on social media have said that they're worried about, investing all of this time, this money, and this resources to just, potentially end up with the same result. And so I think, we'll have to kind of wait and see. Lindsey Graham is really good fundraiser. He has amassed a lot of money. He has a very, very solid war chest to operate with to fight off that challenge from, of course, whoever the nominee is. And again, all worth noting, this is all hypothetical, right? Both of these candidates, they still have to get through a primary, and primaries that, may not be really easy. I mean, Lindsey Graham going up against Paul Dans and a couple of other people. Annie Andrews facing some challengers on the Democratic side as well. So, these two, we expect these two maybe to meet come November, but certainly not a guarantee at this point.
Well, Sophie, it will certainly be interesting to watch, especially as we near those primaries here in South Carolina. We thank you for keeping up with this race. Of course, you can follow along by visiting counton2.com and just click on your local election headquarters, and every update, we'll make sure that we share it right there.